This is the Criterion Creeps podcast, and tonight we're talking about Salvatore Giuliano.
Ooh. Wow,
Well,
that's pretty good.
1962,
hmm
directed by Francesco Rosi.
Hmm. You're
No,
nailing it, dude.
no tagline, but a
hmm
synopsis from Letterboxd. Sicilian bandit Salvatore Giuliano's bullet-riddled corpse is found face down in a courtyard in Castelvetrano. Sure. A handgun and
Sure.
rifle by his side. Local and international press descend upon the scene, hoping to crack open the true story behind the death of this young man who, at the age of 27, had already become Italy's most wanted criminal and celebrated hero. Filming in the exact locations and enlisting a cast of native Sicilians once impacted by the real Giuliano, director Francesco Rosi harnessed the facts and myths surrounding the true story of the bandit's death to create a startling expose of Sicily and the tangled relations between its citizens, the mafia, and government officials. So, RJ,
Yeah,
what were you about to say?
nothing. I
Okay.
was gonna say nothing. It's a good description.
As we ended last week's episode, and I said we would be watching Salvatore Giuliano, which I think I might have
hmm
even said Giuliani at the time.
Who knows?
Who knows at this point?
Yeah.
I was like, I have no idea what this movie's going to be about. I like, I realized I had no idea what this movie was going to be, and I briefly looked it up a couple days before we recorded last week,
hmm
and I was like, oh, that doesn't sound too bad. That
hmm
sounds like actually right up my alley. But I really don't hear people talk about this one. Martin Scorsese's got it on his top 10 Criterion list, and he considers it one of his 12 favorite movies. Apparently,
I, I can speak to that because in the documentary, The Filmmaker in the Labyrinth, also known as Sinestra e el Labirinto, Scorsese. That's perfect Italian, by the way. Scorsese has a lot of dialogue, and he talks about the film candidly. So,
mhm,
I mean, I'll get to that when I get to it. But yeah,
okay,
he likes it quite a bit.
big fan.
Big fan.
And there's one of my dudes, Costa Graphis. We have not come to his films yet in the collection. There's a few like
Who's he?
Z, Missing.
Hmm.
I don't know if there's any other ones of his off the top of my head. Oh, there is. I'm just blinking out. But he has this in like his like top 10 list somewhere abouts.
Interesting.
Yeah. So when I read about this movie, I was like, "Ooh, this sounds like a docudrama thriller."
hmm
I'm a fan of those types of things. But I also had absolutely no idea who Salvatore Giuliano was. None.
hmm
I don't think I've ever heard of this guy in my life.
hmm
Which, of course, after I watched the movie, and I'm like, huh. Like I realized, like, oh, this based on a true story, I suppose. And then after watching the movie, to maybe get a little bit more context, I was
hmm
kind of like, wait a minute. The Sicilian is about this Salvatore Giuliano guy. The Christopher Lambert movie.
Oh, Lambert? Are you talking about Raiden from the Mortal Kombat
Yeah,
movies?
the Highlander himself.
One and the same. Yeah, you see some Christopher Lambert full frontal nudity in the Sicilian.
Oh man.
Not by him, but you do see his butt completely nude. So,
Okay.
in
So
case you're wondering.
okay.
Yep.
So I went into this movie basically blind, other than a few like
Nice.
shots, and
hmm
immediately was hit with the like stark white text on the black background, and
hmm
this like very like menacing score that like comes and goes, but I don't know, at times, RJ, I don't know if you had this experience, like really put me in the mind of a Night of the Living Dead type of deal, where it felt like
Yeah.
it felt very horror movie-ish.
hmm
So yeah, the movie opens up with Salvatore Giuliano dead, face down on the ground, and you have this like really great scene. I love this sort of like procedural stuff where there's a man who's just like literally describing what you're seeing before you in this cold, calculated, factual manner, and there's all these people
hmm
standing around, paunchy men, piebald, standing around with mustaches, little skinny black ties, and they're fanning themselves, uh,
hmm
hands on either side of their hips, just looking down at things. I love that stuff. And
Yep.
you're getting all these shots building up, like what you're just looking at a crime scene. You don't know who this guy is. At least I didn't.
hmm
Um, and then the movie starts to kind of like tell this thing of like, oh, this is like a big deal, and there seems to be elements of like a cover up of some sort, because there's like witnesses talking about what they've seen, but what the police are making these claims based on not a lot of information.
Mm-hmm.
And then the movie starts kind of going back and forth between the present day that the movie kind of sets itself in, and then it flashes back to who is this Salvatore Giuliano? What's his story all about? And that story is so 1943, World War II is going down, and you have this Salvatore Giuliano, who is a black market type. He's like 23 years old. He's like, you know, he's stealing supplies and food and stuff like that, but it's to give to people. And apparently he stole, like, the tales goes, he stole like 2 loaves of bread or something like that. And in the process of like this thieving, he killed a cop. And they start the manhunt, and they proceed to look for this guy for the next 7 years.
Are you saying that he was stealing from the rich and giving to the needy, Jarrett?
I think that's maybe what I'm saying.
Wow.
Wow.
What an interesting idea. I've never heard of that before.
So someone should make a movie about that.
They should. They should.
Set it in
An animal kingdom with a fox as the lead?
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Interesting.
So we get factions laid out to us, RJ. Factions that 55, 60 years removed from. It's kind of hard to wrap your mind around what's going on, and you wonder like what the audience for this movie was, because Rosi doesn't like walk you through too much. There's a little bit of a voiceover narration, and he explains very quickly, matter of factly, yeah, here's this person. This is this particular task force. They're separatists. They want Sicily to be an independent country separate from Italy. That Italy from Rome does not do Sicily any good. And they're willing to fight for it in this moment when the country is just beginning to rebuild after the defeat of Mussolini. And yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that every country has these sort of histories, but it's not like one that's going to be taught in every textbook because there's simply not enough time. So it was a crash course in a lot of ways of Italian history. And it actually, the weirdest thing for me, my big takeaway initially with Salvatore Giuliano was I was watching this because this is 1962. And the watching this movie, which is gorgeous to look at. This movie looks absolutely amazing. The black and white photography, we'll talk about the guy who did that, but it looks incredible. These landscapes too, like these like harsh, unforgiving landscapes. But I was like, I've seen these landscapes before because I watched all these spaghetti westerns, these Italian western movies, and so I started thinking about this movie in terms of like a western, and then I started thinking of like, it's also about revolution. And I was wondering, like, in my mind, these spaghetti westerns that kind of like, especially toward like maybe the late 60s, they start really embracing the revolutionary narrative of Mexico, and kind of like, I'm like, oh, maybe there's like a connection to that somewhere along the line. But you also have like the student uprisings and like general like upheaval of the 60s, the cultural changes happening, and it's like this movie like kind of predates that by a few years, but it's kind of like tapping back into the spirit of it. Like that was something that was happening like in the still in the 40s until Giuliano was dead. But yeah, that was just something I was like thinking of at the beginning of this.
The spirit of communism.
The spirit of, wow, these guys aren't the communists. These guys want to kill those communists because the communists they don't want Sicily to leave Italy, but it's
complex politics, Jared.
And then it gets real violent there. So there's an interesting thing that I was watching this movie, and there came a point where I'm like, who the hell's Salvatore Giuliano? Like, I'm like, who? Like, he's dead. But I'm like, we haven't seen him, right? Like, I mean, like, have I been like falling asleep watching this or totally zoning out? But I'm like, no, you never see the guy. He's never a figure. He never gives a big speech.
He's just a corpse.
He's just a corpse. You see him, giving very shallow breaths through his stomach as his mother wails over his body. But yeah, like he's just a body. He's an idea, RJ.
Which I think is spectacular. And I'll talk about when I get to it when I talk about the filmmaker in the Labyrinth. But Franco Risi, it's his name, right?
Rosi.
Franco Rossi. He talks about it a lot, and then like everyone else kind of talks about it too. Where his big thing was like he's like the guy himself wasn't as big of a thing. And he's like, and I also didn't want to like glamorize the criminal to a point where he's just like, this was a guy with ideas that led to other things. He's like, but he's like, he was just this guy also. So he's like, it's the aftermath that's important, not what he did or who he was. It's what comes after, right? I think that's like why it's presented as such, where the whole movie, he's just a corpse. He's just like this dead guy because Francesco Rosi was just like, yeah. It's what happens later. That's what's important. You know? Yeah. There's a little bit like stuff before too, but like I think his main point, he's just like it's what came after this, right?
Yeah. So I was like fairly like along with this movie as far as like the laying out of the landscape of Italian politics that I don't know anything about. To a point, it seemed like, oh yeah, there's this figure who's kind of like brought into the movement, the separatist movement, because like, hey, he gets results, and he seems to be able to elude the police, and he starts becoming more active in like, you know, hitting the capillaries or something like that. Essentially, it's like the equivalent of their Royal Mounted Police, like, but they're slightly more like on the there's more of a military element to it, I guess. But yeah, it's essentially that. Like these are the guys who were like on this like manhunt to track this man down and bring down all his accomplices who are all covering for him.
Yeah.
And then there's kind of so you get to see like a deployment of like urban warfare, rural warfare as these guys move around. It's just like kind of like a fascinating thing where you're seeing like just guys wearing like, you know, big floppy hats, tweed jackets, hopping around through fields with these rifles, taking back, you know, their community that they feel is being neglected by their government. And it's kind of like, oh yeah, like it's such a, like you don't think of Italy in this way at all. I don't think. It seems like, yeah, it's always like it's like Godfather, which apparently, and there's like even weird connections to like Godfather, where it's like there's like I think is it a deleted scene or something like that? But there's a bit where like there's like a bunch of people who are like going to the massacre, like they're like on their way to the massacre or something like that. It's like a scene that's been deleted or something like that from the Godfather. I can't remember.
There's even more ties in that too, because a lot of people tried to everyone, it seems like the Sicilian is just often regarded as like diet Godfather or like discount no brand Godfather, where it's like they're trying to do these things, it's just they don't really do it, you know. But that comes later
in the movie The Sicilian.
Yeah, and the movie The Sicilian. Yeah, not Salvatore Giuliano.
All right.
is how it's pronounced, Jarrett.
Giuliano.
Sure, that works too.
So, yeah. So this movie, like, it's just like it's very reported. Like it feels like it again docudrama kind of style of the film. Just like depicting like the events of what's happening. I do find that there is a point where it becomes a little more difficult to follow because there's just these characters and everyone's cousins, and then there's mention of cuckolding, and
oh my god,
I know
again.
It always is happening in these movies.
It's unescapable.
You know, it was always there with us. But yeah, so one of the big scenes, I guess, is like the police's response to like trying to track down these terrorists, these bandits, is to just round up all the men.
I mean, is that not what you would do?
I mean, it makes sense, but I don't know how that flies from an optics standpoint.
Well, all I know is that when I need a problem solved, I just get every man in the city. And I figure it out. Okay, Jer?
Yeah. So you arrest them all.
You figure it out.
And then you round them up. And then you pick out the accused from that lot. They're going to take him away, and then all your Italian women come charging out. This wild mob.
Do you want to hear? Do you want to hear something fun about that scene?
Sure.
So apparently, old Frank Rosi, he went to the women of that community, whatever, I can't remember what the town is called, and he asked them if they wanted to be in the movie, and they said no. So he said, no problem. I'll go get a bunch of prostitutes, and they'll do it. So he talks about this in that documentary, and he's like, all right, the women of this town don't want to do it. I don't really care. He's like, I'll get a bunch of prostitutes to fill in the roles. So he got a bunch of buses and went to the neighboring community and picked up every prostitute in town. He brought them to the film set, and he showed them what he wanted to do. And then all the women in that community was like, whoa, you got a bunch of whores out here. People are going to think this town is made up of whores. So they're like, no, we are the women of this town. So they came too. And then it like doubled the amount of women that they had for that scene. So I think that scene's pretty neat, where it's all the women like rioting for the men. Mm-hmm. And it was nice. It was interesting to hear old Francesco Rosi talking about. He's like, yeah, they didn't want to do it, so I got a bunch of prostitutes, and it turned out good in the end.
No,
you're like, good for you, bud. Good for you.
When the squadrons are deployed to hold back the masses, it's pretty effective. It's pretty chilling. The sound of the wailing and the screaming and stuff like that. Very, very intense. Yeah, speaking of other intense things, this movie's depictions of writhing, I think, are pretty unprecedented. Like, there's like the one soldier who gets shot, and his like the whole fact that he's like fighting it because his body is contorted, the muscles around him are contorting to like deal with this bullet lodged in him, and like these guys are carrying him around. He's just like fighting it, and you're like, yeah, that's like, it's not guys just going being completely like not struggling, and it's like, no, this guy's fighting for his life because his body's trying to like get out of the situation it's in, and then he just passes. And then later on, when
the poisoning,
the poisoning, the strychnine poisoning, that's got some writhing too.
It's super effective though, because like it works, because he's just like, I'm sick. He's like, I ain't good. Someone gave me bad stuff, and his like whole body's just like real like waving around. You're like, yeah, shit, this dude does look sick. That's what I thought, at least. I don't know. Yeah, it's a good job. And then even like you said before, the mother wailing, that's a form of writhing too. Yep. Which one guy on the documentary said it's the best film of any movie.
The best film of any movie.
I can't remember who it was. It was some guy who is also a director or something like that, and he just said it's the best film in any movie. So without question, you should also believe that. I believe.
I see.
Don't question things, Jarrett. Just accept it.
Oh, yeah. There's actually Francesco Rosi. He also directed a movie that I actually have a Blu-ray of that I have never watched, called Many Wars Ago from 1970. It's actually a World War I movie that is it's like the Italian-Austrian front. That sounds pretty awesome, and I was thinking about the movie because I didn't realize he actually directed it till just now, and I was like, I should probably get around to watching that.
There was some scenes of it in the doc, and I gotta tell you, Jer, it looks awesome. Yeah. It really does. And he was talking about, apparently, like, the movie was not well received because and I really appreciate his like stance on it, which, I mean, it's nothing revolutionary or anything like that, but he was kind of like, he's like, war was always like glorified, and he's like, and there was always this false idea that like soldiers, there was always like anyone could like rise up to a point and achieve something, and he's like, that's not the case. He's like, in the army, in the military, he's like, there were these class systems that existed there too, and he's like, and it wasn't good. He's like, nobody liked it, and he's like, that's what I tried to make in my movie. So I was like, he seems like a super smart dude, Francesco Rosi, and the scenes of that movie, I was watching, and the documentary is an hour long, and it's kind of like it was good for me to watch it for this, but at the same time, I was kind of like, ooh, I wish I had just watched that movie instead of seeing some of the scenes play out in this doc without having seen them prior. But that movie looks good. I encourage you to watch it one day.
I will.
Good. Good.
So yeah, there is a point where like I feel that the storytelling in this movie becomes a little unclear because I don't know if the context seems assumed, and coming at it at this point it's harder. And then we get the protracted trial scene, which I mean, it's a risk. It's always a risk in movies. Sometimes they work out really well if you've got like enough like inherent drama in it. But I don't know if this movie's got enough drama to drive the. I don't know how long it goes. Like it's at least a solid half hour of courtroom drama and flashbacks to like new information, and then there's the introduction of like the mafia into it, where you're like, wait, what's happening here? Like, because they're just casually dropped. I'm like, well, what kind of mafia are we talking about? Like the mafia, and like, what's their relationship to these things? Or it's just like, oh yeah, they're just there, and now they're working with the police, kind of, and like getting people out or something, and it becomes just way more like convoluted, especially as it's cutting back and forth between the quote unquote present and the past, and then you're getting flashbacks within the contemporary back and forth. That I wasn't so on board with.
Well, Jared, I don't know if you know this, but it's described as non-linear storytelling.
Yeah, I've heard all about that.
Oh, really?
Generally, though, you need to have some sort of demarcation, I think, to help with that transition, I think.
Apparently, he didn't give a shit, and he was just like, people will figure it out. And
if they don't, then they'll just be frustrated and be like, I'm very lost. Maybe it's it'll smooth over in subsequent viewings, because you know people are popping in their Salvatore Giuliano all the time.
Sure. I mean, I popped my laser disc in 4 or 5 times today, even just to give it a whip.
This was a big 2-disc DVD too.
Because of all the supplements.
Yep. Yeah, they went all out on this one.
So I did, in terms of Criterion Channel supplements, I watched the documentary Filmmaker in the Labyrinth, which is an hour long. There was also a full commentary of the movie on there. I did not watch that. And then there was 2 other things that were like 3 minutes long, whereas, I don't know, random ass people talking about the movie. I didn't give a shit about that stuff. Right. So, but it did seem like a lot. Did the supplements also have the 1987 film The Sicilian?
No, they did not.
Man, it's too bad. It's
too
bad they missed out. Yep. So what else is going on?
Well, then basically we just get kind of how, you know, the state always wins, and they basically lock up who they want to lock up and do what they're going to do with those who cooperate, and that's just the end of the story. The kind of like the second in command, I guess, Gaspar Pisciotta. Played by Frank Wolf, who shows up in a ton of things, even the Wasp Woman.
I just went to his page and then I saw something. It was like even pops up in Roger Corman producing,
and it was like Atlas and 6 Ski Troop Attack. Remember?
I just watched 6 Ski Troop Attack. 6 Ski
Troop Attack. There's no 6 in it.
Ski dope. Ski Troop Attack. I watched that like a week ago, and I don't remember seeing Frank Wolf at all.
Nope, no. It seemed like it was just ski instructors hanging out, pretending to be soldiers. Anyway, so but once you get to the prison stuff, that's really well laid out, and I found that really good. The beautiful architecture. It's like hell. I mean, if you're going to be in a prison for the rest of your life, I mean, you could pick worse prisons.
It's not bad. The guards are in there for him. Is like Sharon smokes. Guard's like, I shouldn't, but because he's like, I could definitely go get my own cigarettes, but I'll take one of yours.
Yeah, thanks, Papa Bear.
I'll take one of yours.
No, and then we get horrible poisoning, which you just know is coming, because as soon as you start talking about how I'm going to spill all the beans, next page, and he was found dead in his prison cell. And it's even more obvious, I guess, the display of like, hey, none of you boys better be talking none. And then
why would he do that?
Yeah, And then then we think the movie's about to end. Then we get a flash forward, and then we get a guy getting gunned down.
How so?
By getting shot by bullets.
Interesting.
In a crowd, and you're like, who's that guy again?
who is this guy?
Who's this old gray-haired guy? Is that the mafia guy? What's this about?
You go, what does this matter?
What a moment. What a moment.
Mm-hmm.
So RJ, I'm curious. What did you think of Salvatore?
Salvatore Giuliano?
Yeah.
I don't. I'm just gonna interrupt for a second. I don't think you even said, do you like this film or no?
I'm asking you.
I think this thing is super good, and that might surprise you.
It kind of does.
Yeah. Do you share that, or are you?
I really like elements of this movie. I like parts of it, but I mean, I do feel like that trial goes on ridiculously long.
You know what I think?
I don't know. It's like you don't need it to that degree. And but yeah, no, like I love this style of filmmaking. Like I'm a total sucker for it. But I do feel that those things like that really, like, I don't know, clocking in. I mean, it's like a 2-hour movie.
2 and 5 or something like that.
Yeah, with all the little credits at the beginning and the end. But yeah, I mean, like, I know I did like this movie. But I mean, I feel like, I mean, I know that Costa Gravis, who does like very similar things, he does this, I think, better, like a lot better. Okay. Where I don't think there's like any real qualms. But this is like the stuff like Day of the Jackal, kind of like for me, like falls into the same realm too.
Yep, I think that makes sense. And I'll lay it out to you like this. You know what I think actually helped a ton? I watched this in 2 segments. I watched an hour and 10 one night, and I watched an hour a next night, which I know people are going to go all like shit on me for. They're like, you got to watch it in one full stint. And it's like, I get it. Knocking shit over. It's like, I get it. I do. But I watched like an hour of it, and I just, unforeseen things came up. I had to go deal with something, and then I came back to it. And I think it actually broke it up a really nice way where when I watched the second half, I was like, I think this is good, dude. So I actually, surprisingly, I think I'm going to shock the world here. This was actually super enjoyable for me because I was like, I like it a lot. A few things. The story itself, I think, is pretty interesting. And I'm like you, I knew nothing about this person or these things that happened. So it was very informative to me. Number 2, it looks fucking great. It's so good. Like, there's so many shots where it's just like long stretches of Italian like streets and like corridors and just like a person or two standing there, and it just, everything is framed so nicely. I was like, oh, love it. Looks awesome. Looks great. It the story was interesting, and then I think so the one thing that just to steal from old Martin Scorsese here, he talks about the precision. And when I heard him say that, I was like, what's he talking about? I was like, what's this nerd talking about? But listening to you talk about certain details, I was like, it actually is like, I think it's a sharp, precise, fine artisan film craft where I think the opening is awesome. And I also like the layout where it's just like, it's like, this is how it is. We're going to dismantle this crime scene. Bring in the reporters. And then you get like the shots of all the people in the windows and stuff like that, like looking over it. And you're like, ooh, baby. And then that leads to the military politics and the streets. And you get soldiers kind of placed out everywhere. And you see how townspeople react. And it is precise. Kind of like how Martin, I call him Martin because we're good buds.
Not Marty.
Not Marty. No, I call him his full Catholic name because I understand. So it is precise, like the way everything is laid out. You're like, God damn. You're like, that's pretty good. I like it a lot. I think the other things is I think this movie is very topical to current day affairs. I mean, we don't have discord in the streets with like mafioso.
Just discord on our laptops.
It's just Discord on our laptops. It's the superior platform, and everyone's still Zooming for whatever reason. But I just thought there was a lot of overlap. I was like whenever they had those things where it's just like, all right, you got 1 hour, come out, get your food, go back inside. It's like military curfew, political curfew. This is what's happening. And I was like, it's easy to draw some things like that now, and it's just like, this is just how it was. And it's like, it's a recurring thing in history. Like when you have times of say war or I don't know, pandemics, things like that. And it's like, maybe that's what it'll be. It's like people get lottery style. Be like, here, you got 1 hour at the grocery store. Go for it, bud. I don't know. Anyway, I thought it was like topical in that sense. And then I also liked, so I did like the non-linear approach, and I know it's kind of funny. Like those other people address it where they're just like, yeah, he didn't give a shit. He's like, you either figured it out or you didn't, which I could see. I think in a different occasion, I'd be really pissed off about that because I wouldn't understand it. But this one, because I was kind of like, I picked it up at 2 different times, it was easier for me maybe. But so I like that. The court proceedings are fine. And then what else did I like about this?
I think with the court stuff, I always felt it was very repetitive.
Yeah,
like,
it is.
It just kind of goes over the same material, and then they go, but they're setting things up, and I'm like, I think there's a better way to have presented this, like in a more entertaining way, rather than like this where something. So I feel like, I don't know, maybe my expectations of the court drama have been refined by great episodes of Matlock and Law and Order or something. But like, it feels very like clunky there, like where it's just like, like why is this, like why are we, like, I guess it's like maybe it's more accurate to present the way, but it's still ridiculous. Like it doesn't feel accurate. I'll still feel cinematic, but it doesn't feel as well crafted, I think, as other parts of the movie. Yeah. Oh, I was going to say, like, because you were talking about the cinematography. So Gianni Di Venanzo, who shot movies like 8½, Juliet of the Spirits, Big Deal on Madonna Street. And a few Michelangelo Antonioni movies we'll be watching one day.
Yeah, no, he's great, man. Like I recognized his name too. I couldn't really remember because I don't remember anything we talk about, but I was like, yeah, this dude from Italian. Words are tough. I was like, this guy's real good. So cinematography is great, and then I know what you mean. You prefer the Dick Wolf to the Frank Wolf for court proceedings.
Yeah.
Wait, Frank Wolf looks a lot like Jimmy Kimmel in some of those court scenes too, which I found strange. But anyways, one thing that I do like, and I think it gets talked about even better in like the little documentary of people who are kind of pulling this thing apart. They talk about how like Francesco Rosi himself is talking about, he's like there's a lot of uncertainty about what happened in these actual literal historical events, and he's like, I tried to present it in such a way where he's like, I didn't want to like bias it, and he says I didn't want to like romanticize the criminal aspect of it. He's like, I was just trying to make a document based on what people know. So like, you know, the scene where they're up in the mountains and it's like the peace rally, the May Day scene where like that they all got charged for. Apparently for that scene, he got a bunch of the townspeople that were actually there the day that it happened. Yeah. And he was just like, do what happened on that day. And they were all like, okay. And so once they started shooting, he's like, people were trampling each other. He's like, a bunch of people got hurt. And he's like, and then a lot of people came up to me screaming, and they're like, this is exactly how it was the day that it happened. And he's like, I feel kind of bad about it now. He's like, it's tough stuff. And you're like, oh shit. But I do think he does present it in a way where it's it's like the whole thing where Salvatore Giuliano, he's just a corpse the whole movie. And like, I actually think it brings it around really nicely where he's just like, this is what happened. He's like, I'm not glorifying this guy. I'm not saying that he was great, even like, because apparently like people did see him as a Robin Hood type, but he's just like, I don't know, he was a criminal. Because the more you look into it, he did kidnap people and like do shit like that. So I was like, well,
so, yeah, that's like one thing that I always do wonder about, and I need to ask somebody about this. But like, so, the success of kidnapping and ransoming people, is that like a real successful way? Like, I mean,
I have an example based on not just this, guy's life, but also The Sicilian, starring Christopher Lambert. So apparently this guy, they called him a Robin Hood because he would go to local shops and buy like money, or he would buy their products for like 10 times what it was worth. He'd be like, loaf of bread, 30 cents. He's like, I'll give you $3 for it. Whatever. Who gives a shit? But so that's why they thought he was a Robin Hood type. But then he would do kidnapping, and it was a lot of it sounded like The Implication. So there's a scene in The Sicilian where he goes into this lady's house and he like demands her jewelry and she doesn't give it to him, and then they have sex. Jerry, it's very sensual. But apparently like there's a detailed account of like he would do this to people, and there was like one account with a lady where he's like, I want your jewelry, and she said no, and he was like, I'm gonna kidnap your kids and I'm gonna take them unless you give me like all your belongings, kind of. So I think in his sense, and at the very least that one occasion, it was more The Implication where he was actually already in the house with the people, and he's like, listen, give me all your stuff or I'm taking all your kids. And so they did. Mm-hmm. But I don't know about like the ransom Mel Gibson situation, how much that's going to play out for the average man. Yeah. Jared. So anyways, I liked it for many of those reasons, but it looks great. I was really surprised by it, that I liked it as much as I did, because I think it could very easily be a super boring movie for a lot of people. But I was like, I like this Salvatore Giuliano Tone Bongani.
You like that
full
guy?
Name. Yeah, I like that guy. He's a cool guy.
No. Yeah,
so,
I mean,
anything else to add?
I don't know. Like, yeah, just like, I mean, everything about this type of filmmaking is like very much in my wheelhouse, RJ.
Yeah. I thought you would have liked it more, to be honest, but that's okay.
But I mean, like, I do like it. I think it's a good movie. Yeah. But yeah, I just like, I wish it was like, oh, I wish that was different. But maybe I'll feel better about it watching a second time. I do mean, I do still like looking at my my current rankings. It does actually right now I'd put it like even like maybe around like Le Corbeau kind of range. Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, it's good. But yeah, I just like I wish it was tighter in that in that area, because otherwise it'd be great, because like, yeah, the movies it influences are really amazing movies.
Yeah, I'm with you, dude. 100%.
Nice. You want to hear about who hates this movie though?
I guess,
or do you want to talk about The Sicilian?
I mean, there's not much to talk about.
Michael Cimino's The Sicilian.
Okay, so it's The Man Who Brought Us, Thunderbolt and Lightfoot.
Yep,
that's right. Not those other two movies. Deer Hunter and Heaven's Gate.
Yeah.
So this is way more. It's actually about Salvatore Giuliano Tony. It's about like his life portrayed by Raiden from Mortal Kombat. It's all the stuff leading up to him, and they really play up the Robin Hood thing where he's like, it's like, you remember that trailer for Public Enemies, or as I call it, Pubic Enemas, with Johnny Depp, where he's like robbing the banks and that guy puts his money out and he's like, we're here for the bank's money, not yours. It's a lot of that kind of shit, and you're like, I wonder if this guy would have been like that. But there's a lot of that, and then there's a lot of melodrama romance between him and like this lady. And I don't know, 10 minutes into a scene where they're just like playing around, like hitting each other with flowers, they're like, oh, you. And it's like, oh, you. You're just kind of like, fuck, who gives a shit? Is kind of how I got. But John Turturro was there as Frank Wolf, so that's pretty cool. There's some stuff in it that's fine, but after watching Salvatore Giuliano, I was like, this Sicilian is not my bag. So I think you could just watch Salvatore and you'd be fine. And then like The Filmmaker and The Labyrinth, I watched also, and it's more about all of his movies. But the one thing I'll say about that is Francesco Rosi. He seems like a smart guy, and he's got an interesting story about how his dad wanted to be an artist, but he was never really allowed to, so he became a filmmaker instead. And you're like, wow, what a sweet guy. So anyways, who hates Salvatore Giuliano?
Well, Veronica does. 1.5 star.
Okay.
I don't know if this is typical or not, but I found this film extremely hard to follow. I am still not exactly clear on what is going on here. I feel like I would require some background in Sicilian politics to fully grasp this slippery film.
Slippery, much like Veronica's ratings. Oh, no, there's tons of Criterion stuff, but like they have, I don't know, fucking 500 5-star films. So like, what are you supposed to pull out of that? Let's go to.
Oh Jesus!
Film,
I can't hear a thing you're saying. One sec.
Did you?
No,
Did you hear any of that?
No.
Oh, well, I was saying their 5-star films are all Criterions, and they have over 500, so there's not much to get out of that.
Okay.
But half-star films include things like Trash Humpers. Do you think that's a half-star film?
Absolutely not. But I can see that if someone didn't like Trash Humpers that much, they probably wouldn't like this movie either. Even though they're completely different movies.
They are completely different. What about Last Woman on Earth by Roger Corman? Is that half stars?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, here's a real one for you, though. Yep. Half-star films include Requiem for a Dream and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. And Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer.
Yeah, that sounds about right to me. Sounds about right to me.
Not great?
No.
Not great.
Next up, we have Chris Underwood. Sounds like a country singer.
Sure, why not?
There is a problem with this film. Bold, courageous, and outspoken though it is, director Franco Rosi is somewhat held captive by his conflicting Communist Party and neo-realist filmic leanings. Presented as if a street reality, he is caught between the style and the substance, which is made far worse by the ambiguity of the central character, who we only see as a dead man. As a picture of post-war Sicily and its poverty-stricken towns and labyrinthine streets, it appears remarkable, but as to who is doing what and for why, much more confusing. I understand it was not just me who was confused. Giuliano himself appears to be a man of many faces, and apart from often appearing to be a man of the people, keen to wrestle his country from the hands of the Italian government, he went so far as to suggest that it should become a part of the U.S., Rosi is therefore considerably conflicted here, as with his background and beliefs. He is keen to bring a much more left-oriented administration to the whole of Italy. Such is the result on film that we are presented with the main thrust of discontent and the evils of the state and judiciary, and an implication that behind the scenes our hero had everyone's interest at heart. Bit sentimental, you might say, and a difficult watch.
Yeah, they sound like a smart person.
Very keen.
Very keen. I mean, their ratings aren't bad. It's like 5 stars to things like Suspiria, Onibaba, your favorite film, The Guest. What else we got here? Neon Demon, 5 stars apparently. Long Goodbye. Other good movies. Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, they give 5 stars. But then they also gave Edmund with William H. Macy 5 stars.
Hells yeah.
Which I think you would perhaps agree with.
I would never give that movie 5 stars.
Oh, they gave Uncut Gems a 0.5 star. Strange.
Huh. That is...
What, Edmund?
Yeah. What?
Oh, we're way out of sync here, but we're making it work.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, no, I said I wouldn't give Edmund no 5 stars, but I'm surprised about Uncut Gems.
Yeah, strange, right?
No. And finally, Round My Way, 2 stars. I think the reviews of this film suffer from what Frank of the Film Junk podcast refers to as Criterionitis. This is the assumption that if a film is chosen for the Criterion Collection, it must be brilliant. Yes, the story of Salvatore Giuliano is an interesting one, and the use of him as almost a specter of Sicilian history rather than as a participant is clever, but the use of non-actors really brings the film down. I understand why the director did this, but scenes such as the one where Giuliano's mother claims his body is painful to watch for all the wrong reasons. I was laughing so hard I was crying at this scene. There are other scenes where actors are just shouting for no reason other than they are not trained. In a way, the cinema verite approach gives the viewer the feeling of watching real life unfold, but there's also an amateurish feeling about the film.
I I agree with the Criterionitis thing because it's something we talk about all the time.
That's literally kind of the point of our
Point?
podcast, I
Yep.
guess.
But I find it funny they say that because one of their favorite films and a 5-star film of theirs is A Band Apart, which is like, it's an okay show, but I think that's a Criterionitis show if I've ever seen one.
Mm-hmm.
But here's some 1-star films from around my way. Eraserhead, Borat,
What?
Scott Pilgrim, Major League, which I've been talking about a lot lately, The Big Chill, and Orange County, which we don't know where we stand on Orange County anymore. We just don't know.
We don't know.
We just don't know. It's up in the air at the moment, so we'll see, I guess.
No, I guess so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's an element of intentionality, I guess,
Sure.
with this, whatever this guy's calling his amateur feelings about the film, or whatever the amateurish is that he's talking about. I feel like there's an intent in that, maybe. But I mean, like I said, I definitely did at times feel lost in the narrative because like I have no idea who these people are anymore. So I won't hold it against it. But again, like so much of this movie is like the stuff I like to watch, and I love finding out about more of these movies because nobody actually talks about these movies in the context of this genre, these kind of like political thrillers, which is kind of frustrating because I would love to know more about more like of these types of movies because like I've been trying to find these types of things all along, and I had no idea what this movie was, and here it was right under my nose, a future creep, now current, and now soon to be past creep.
And it's too bad, right? It's a shame.
It's a damn shame. Got any final thoughts here on
no,
Sal G?
It's like I said, I'm surprised. I was super surprised by it. I actually enjoyed it quite a bit. I thought it was a top-notch guy. So take that as you will.
After the break, you find RJ and Mai's body dead, bullet-ridden. And then for the rest of the podcast, it is only the idea of us that carries us through. And what does that say about you, the listener, and the state of things? Keen.
I think you maybe like the idea of a corpse more than you actually like a corpse.
I think that's very true.